Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen D. Kelley. This is the Stephen D. Kelley Show. We are Truth Cat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. 8/6/20. What is that? July? Oh, God. See? I'm not with it. Are we in July or August? Somebody tell me, but I guess we're in August. Yeah, August. Anyway, it's now 6 p.m. where I'm at, 9 p.m. Eastern. The title of the show tonight is The End of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, this is a very big subject, and I will do my best to give you all the details. But before I get into it, I need to say a few things first and then preface the main story. But before I start, I want to tell everybody that the Occupy the Getty movement still is number one, and it is going viral right now. The efforts to hijack the Save the Children effort has backfired, and it would appear that more attention is being cast on the Occupy the Getty movement as a result of this. And we are seeing hashtag Save the Children, hashtag Stand with the Children, hashtag Pedogate, etc., all being banned and censored. Obviously, hashtag Occupy the Getty, I assume, is still working, but I expect that they're trying everything they can not to draw attention to that. But at the same time, I'll report to you that my book is becoming very popular. People, more and more often now, people are asking for a free copy. And at the same time, I've seen people on the internet setting up pages and forums to help distribute the book in various formats to anybody that asks for it. So that's very encouraging. So I want to also remind everybody to double your efforts, because our momentum is incredibly strong right now and we need to push this over the top. So continue to post Occupy the Getty everywhere you can, and also post the slogan, Occupy the Getty is the plan to save the world. We want to spam that everywhere, not just on things related to something done by me, but other formats, other venues. And those of you that are on Instagram, TikTok, MeWe, whatever, all that, which we will be talking about tonight, all the various different modes of social communication out there, take it upon yourself to be the biggest proponent of our issue on those platforms. Don't expect me to do it. All right? I need each one of you to act as promoters, managers, producers, and create the show yourself and get it out there. So we're winning this war. It's amazing. And the information I talked to you about tonight is basically as ominous as it gets. World War III. COVID is secondary to what's really coming. So it's important when we cover all the details of this that we are focusing on China right now, because China is going to be a major player in the theater that we're about to be exposed to. And of course, when we look at the players, we have to try our best to not become part of the polarity game, because this is the first thing that will happen. So this is not China bashing per se. What we're really talking about tonight is genocide, because we all know Agenda 21 is coming, and we all know that the cabal, the leaders, the elite, whatever they are, the cavers, they intend to kill off a good 6.5 billion people and reduce the population down to something along the lines of what is printed on the Georgia Guidestones. So in order to do that, in order to kill that many people, you need something much larger than a war. Even a world war involving China and every other country out there on the globe, it would still need to be larger than that and more complex than that to achieve the goal of killing this many people. So what's important is when you try to understand who the players are, who controls them, what their motives are, who stands to benefit, try not to think in terms of black and white and one team against another. Try to understand that each team has opposing and conflicting agendas within each team. So in other words, in order to have a genocide, both opponents need to participate. Both sides need to die. Now, obviously, that wipes out this whole concept of a dual polarity, because then you realize what the true nature of the dual polarity is intended to eventually destroy both sides. So I'll do my best to make that clear, because obviously we're programmed to be thinking in terms of Zionists and Nazis and Bolshevists and socialists, capitalists, these very elements. Obviously, we have the Satanists, the people that live underground, and the people that are really in control. But the labels that you try to use to put on them are sometimes conflicting with the labels you put on these players in the theater that we're going to be talking about tonight. So once again, this is not China bashing per se, although I'll say right now, China is a problem. And unfortunately, human life is valuable, and yet at the same time, history can have drastic effects. So I guess it's a good time to start with the history of the Chinese Communist Party. And I'll just say that towards the end of the war, when the Japanese were being defeated after the horrendous atrocities that they committed in China, the socialists led under Mao and the nationalists led by Chiang Kai-shek had been working together to try to defeat the Japanese. But once that was done, the socialists, who incidentally kind of sat out the war while the nationalists put up most of the fight, they turned on the nationalists and basically defeated them and drove them off to Taiwan. So this, of course, is a very big part of the entire story. It's hard to pick where to start, but I guess we will eventually get to the Taiwan part, because certainly China still believes that Taiwan, formerly the island of Formosa, is part of China. But the thing is, though, is that if you look at those two countries, Taiwan represents a little bit what China used to be. Because when the nationalists left, fortunately, they took with them many of the treasures and some of the architectural treasures that they could. Buddhist statues, relics. They took everything of any value that they could to Taiwan. Now, some people may say that was looting, but the reality is they were very astute and righteous in doing so, because when Mao took charge, one of the first things he did was to destroy any aspect of what he considered old with Chinese culture. So anything old and ancient, anything superstitious, anything to do with religion was destroyed. So any old structures were destroyed. Sort of like when ISIS went into Syria and looted Palmyra and destroyed their artifacts, their priceless artifacts. The same thing happened in China. So now, if you want to see that, you have to go to Taiwan. Now, one of the other things that they did was, of course, being atheist, Marxist, Bolshevist atheist, they destroyed any sense of religion and made the Chinese Communist Party the official religion of the country. So the heart of China which of course was Buddhism and the culture, which was enshrouded in the religion. The only place you can find that now is in Taiwan. Of course, there's also Tibet. Now, of course, Tibet, the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Buddhists were captured and their country taken over by the Chinese communists. But at the same time, the monasteries, some of them at least, as far as I know, were not destroyed, although the Communist Party did try to take over the religion. But the point is that now that's where China has to look if they want to have some semblance of what it used to be like. One of the things that they also did way back when, during this Cultural Revolution, or a giant leap forward or a giant leap backwards, depending on your perspective, was they removed anybody that had any brains. Basically, what Mao did was he put out a call to the people to write letters and offer suggestions of what they thought the party should do for the future of China. Now, basically, of course, this was a trap because people wrote lengthy dissertations on how they thought the future of China should go. And obviously, if you were capable of such, you were deemed an intellectual and you were killed. So massive amounts of people were killed, but mostly it was the smart people. Now, you look at the Chinese population issues, and one of the reasons why it is the way it is because while they were killing off all the smart people, the artists, the monks, the intellectuals, teachers, they were telling the people out in the boonies, the poorest of the poor, the peasants, they were telling them to reproduce, grow large families. And of course, Mao was a very low-life person. He was a peasant. These people really weren't educated, but you'll see this is going to be a trend of the Communist Party even today. There's really only one person in the Communist Party today, well, not the whole party, but the leadership, the top 7, if you will, that has a degree of any substance. He's in economics. Of course, he's the one that's on the outs with the current leader, Xi Jinping. You know him. He's the guy with the glasses standing next to Xi Jinping. Anyway, there's actually fighting going on between those two. Well, so they got rid of their brains, they got rid of their religion, they got rid of their culture. They grew too many stupid people. This backfired, and this led to the one-child policy, which of course is giving them a lot of trouble now, but we're not going to cover that too much. But when you look at the powerhouse that China became, most of it you can trace back to Richard Nixon. Now, several presidents, of course, were involved in the process of opening up the country. Jimmy Carter, of course, had a big role, but Richard Nixon had the biggest role. And Nixon, of course, is the one that was connected to Robert Vesco and the mafia, and we have already stated in previous shows that there are certain countries that this mafia controls, China being one of them through the Communist Party, North Korea being another, Iran being another. This will all come into play, of course. So it stands to reason that criminal activity or criminals lusting to engage in criminal activity would be more than happy to try to give China most favored trading status, nation trading status. And this is very important because, first of all, the bottom line, and this is something that we're going to cover through the night, you need to understand this, is that a totalitarian regime such as the Chinese Party, Communist Party, CCP, will lie about everything. And when they lie, it's going to be ridiculously bad and easy to see through. It's sort of like when the North Koreans said they landed a man on the sun, that kind of thing. Now, with the Chinese, it's a little more subtle, but sometimes it's just plain stupid. Like, for instance, the typhoon that's rolling through China, you know, their construction's really crappy, and this woman fell out of her apartment from the 11th floor when she tried to put her window closed, and the damn whole wall fell off, and she fell to the 11 stories to her death. And the Chinese government said that it was her fault because she didn't know how to operate her window properly. Never mind the shoddy construction. They call that tofu construction. We'll talk about tofu construction, and that is going to apply to the Three Gorges Dam. Don't let me forget about that, because that's a big thing that's going on right now. But anyway, needless to say, after Nixon opened up the market and basically let them sell their stuff to us, they got incredibly rich. Now, there's a couple things to consider. First of all, remember, they're going to lie about everything. And that includes their stock market. So if they tell you that a business is booming, or that the profits are soaring, or that the grain harvest is huge, or the rice harvest is huge, or any of this thing, anything like that, GDP is up, all these things, it's going to be a lie. It's never going to be accurate. Everything is going to be glossed over. But the problem is that if you're running a capitalist system and you're trying to have trade with a country, if one of the partners is non-transparent, dictatorial, and able to get away with lying about everything that they do, and if you believe that, then that becomes a problem. Now, here's the thing, though. Every transaction that goes through China, believe it or not, a large portion of the money goes directly into the coffers of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. A very large part, at least about 10%, sometimes more, depending on the transaction. Obviously, if the company is a communist CCP company, then the profit will be 100%. We'll get into that too. But so this has basically allowed China to amass trillions and trillions of dollars, which they've been using to exert influence all over the world. Now, they call this soft power. And what's really important to understand is the soft power has two components. One, the extortion, the bribery, the big money lure, where people take that money and they get into debt, and then situations are manipulated that causes the debt to fail in such a way that you lose your shorts and you end up selling or giving whatever it was that you paid for or you bought back to the Chinese, such as your airport or your shipping port or your highway system or your railway system or your coal mine or your steel factory, or half your country. This is what they do. Now, because of one of the other big aspects of the power is that they can control the media, and they can also use all of their spy techniques, their CIA, their secret police, whatever you want to call it, their branch of the military that deals with military intelligence, which is Norinco, interestingly enough. They control all these guys, these spies. And what they will do is they will basically subvert almost every country out there in the world, find out who people are, corrupt them, and basically extort these people into working for them or giving them money in such a way that they're going to get a foothold in an industry in that country and take over. This is an ongoing thing, but the main thing is that if there is any criticism whatsoever, they will attack and they will criticize back and they will destroy this enemy. So what happens is that if everybody in the world has a debt to China, and of course the United States, all of our debt practically right now is owned by China, most of it, you don't say anything bad about those people, and you let them get away with murder because you dare not do something that will cause them to force you to have to pay that debt back when you're not ready to do such a thing. Well, this is how the game works. Well, the bottom line is that if you extort everybody surrounding you and you extort all of the countries in the world, you may be one of the largest countries, have the biggest population and a lot of money. But if you get the entire world to turn against you because you've extorted them and they suddenly decide to get back at you, this is the situation we have right now. So a lot of people don't really see this. But if you want to understand why the animosity and why suddenly it would appear that China out of nowhere is going to become an insanely large enemy, It's because the whole time it's been acting, the whole time everybody's been playing nice, but they've given that up. So we're going to go down the list of countries that have been affected, and we're going to talk a lot about the military, certainly the Chinese military, as well as the various military alliances and military operations that are taking place right now. Trump, of course, is certainly involved in all of this, and COVID is certainly involved in all of this, and the weather is certainly involved in all this. But let's talk about Trump first. Trump, of course, as I have said, is a Chabad Jew. And he certainly is a puppet of the Chabad Mafia. And the Chabad Mafia are the very same people responsible, i.e. through the Rothschilds, for setting up the current Communist Party and what became the country of China over there. It was with Rothschild backing that Mao was able to do what he did. So basically, to understand why China is the way it is today, you really don't need to look too much further than the Rothschilds, because, as I've said, modern China today epitomizes or closely resembles a very bad part of the United States that we also possess. But thankfully, we also have a large portion of people that do not fit this profile. But unfortunately, a large portion of Chinese, at least the ones that have grown up during the last 60, 70 years of the Chinese Communist Party, which was formed in 1949, of course, they've grown up godless. They've grown up greedy and selfish. A large portion of these people saw famine and starvation. Most of them have extremely poor education. But at the same time, they've done some amazing things. But the problem is that we're talking about a very homogenous society where the Han Chinese are in dominance, and they are inflicting their superiority over the rest of the races, of which there are several species or different tribes. But the bottom line is, these people are, it's hard to understand, but let's put it this way. There's no charity in China. There's no charity. You will not find it. You will not find sparrows and little birds flying around, because if they will capture those things and eat them. If there's an animal, they will eat them. If you went to an open-air market, you would be fighting over a piece of meat, because it's that bad. The powdered milk that they use for the babies is being smuggled in from Hong Kong, because all of the powdered milk produced in China is tainted with a chemical designed to make it appear to have a higher protein value, but it's actually poisonous and kills babies. So, not aside from people would think that the biggest, most smuggled item into China might be some sort of narcotic. No, it's actually powdered milk. And after that becomes chocolate, which is obviously also made with milk. So yes, powdered milk, infant formula, and chocolate. Ferrero Rocher is actually the number one item that is smuggled into China. So you'll see quite a bit of people, tourists, buying out whole shelves of powdered milk, vitamins, anything like that could be counterfeited. There's a huge problem with that, and the people's health is just not taken for granted. I could go on and on about their legal systems and what they don't have, but suffice it to say is this is a society that does not care about poor people, does not care about people who have disabilities, what have you. You will not see that. They also don't tip, surprisingly enough. You will not see any tipping. If you tip somebody, they're going to think you're trying to buy them off and bribe them. But let's talk about Taiwan. There's Donald Trump, if you look at what he's done recently, Mike Pompeo did a big speech here recently, and he did it from the Richard Nixon Rose Garden. And the reason why he chose the Richard Nixon Rose Garden to lay down his speech is because he was basically saying that it was Richard Nixon who set this relationship up with China and gave them this most favored status. Well, Mike Pompeo basically severed that status from the Nixon birthplace road garden over there in Yorba Linda, California. And he said, this is over. He basically told them that it was over. Chinese media will tell you that Pompeo is insane. I can't argue with that. But at the same time, the rosy relationship and the ability for China to get away with what they've done is over. And the only reason it's over is because the entire world has ganged up and basically said, we're all going to work together and we're going to shut this down once and for all. Now, one of the reasons and the sad reality of the reasons why this has to happen, as I've said before, is that one of the main policy endeavors of the current regime that's been going on for 30 years now, Xi Jinping, is to essentially raise everybody's standard of living to upper middle class. And that's 1.5 billion people. Now, in order to do that, he needs to basically consume all of the raw materials and resources everywhere in the world, and the rest of the world cannot allow that to happen because there will be nothing left. It's going to have to happen at the destruction of the rest of the people. So this is why they're having to shut that down. And unfortunately, like any good genocide, this is going to require a lot of people to die. I hate to go straight to COVID, but I guess I'm going to have to do that because I've been telling people for many years, because of my father being involved with research during the Korean War, working with the hated Japanese to basically use their research to figure out how many Chinese they could kill using a biological weapon. And he determined that they could kill 3/5 of all Chinese alive on the planet. Now, we'll talk about the COVID and Wuhan. We'll back out to everybody else, but I guess we better go to the COVID here. Yes, the COVID, in spite of what anybody might say, was developed and militarized in Wuhan. Now, there is a reason for that. Yes, Bill Gates did invest a lot of money in a biotech research institute in Wuhan, but why Wuhan? Wuhan is in central China. It's southwest of Peking, Beijing. And it's the area that the Chinese Communist Party has decided to create as their base, their main secret central base of logistics and command center for the entire military and the rest of the country. So in Wuhan, of course, which is a large city, relatively midway downriver from the Yangtze, there is a major industry. And in other words, it would appear that Wuhan is something like a Detroit in China. This is where General Motors China is located. And I suspect this is where most of the Chinese military is developing all of their technology and all of their state-of-art of equipment. It's been rumored, of course, their land vehicles, all of their land vehicles, their tracked vehicles are being developed in Wuhan, as well as their submersible vehicles and small ships. Their Navy is doing research there also. Now, if you look at Wuhan by satellite, you can identify these facilities and you can see them, and you can see that they're also located skirting the rim of a minor mountain. It's almost like a large hill, but I will say I'll call it a small mountain. And this area is designated as a sanctuary, a wildlife sanctuary, if you will, what is it, a forestry type area. Anyway, it's a park area, and it's not considered part of Wuhan. It's considered part of a designated wildlife sanctuary. When in reality, a large portion of this military industrial area is in this area because it's backing up to this mountainside, which is called this sanctuary. Obviously, they have built a structure underneath this mountain. This is their underground base. The reason why they did this was because the Chinese Marxist Communist Army, People's Liberation Army, does not serve the people. It serves the Communist Party. And if you've ever been exposed to Chinese propaganda and the sort of crap that is drilled into the heads of these people, you'll hear words like resolutely support the commands of the Chinese Communist Party, things of this nature. In other words, the entire population is commanded to follow the wisdom and the whims of the Chinese Communist Party no matter what. Now, bear in mind, there's about 150 million people in the Chinese Communist Party, not counting their family members. But in China, the only way you can get ahead and make money like they do over there isn't through hard work and perseverance. It's through connections. So if you have somebody in the Communist Party in your family, they will steer business your way. And this is how it's done. So every single thing they do, make sure that somebody connected to somebody is getting paid off very well. Very often when the Chinese, of course, go into a foreign country using their aid to get the country into a debt trap, and they build this project, the host country thinks that the local people will be put to work, only to find out that China will build whole cities to house the Chinese workers that they will ship in. Of course, this causes a lot of trouble, and we'll discuss that when we look at all the little countries that are pissed off at China right now, because that's one of the things they're not too happy about. So, the Chinese debt trap. Wow. Obviously, the United States is certainly in on that. We have treasury bonds and real estate, and obviously the Chinese Communist Party has siphoned off a good portion of all the money that they have made off of the United States and everybody else in the last 60, 70 years. And they've taken that money and invested a lot of it in the United States. Certainly, they've put a lot of it in Swiss bank accounts, but nothing works like real estate. Obviously, mobsters know that. So it's like, Trump Tower. They're going to find places to spend their money here. And what they do is they will send their children and their family members to the United States, because the United States has such a lax system when it comes to green cards and visas and becoming a United States citizen, especially when that person is willing to dump a whole bunch of money somewhere. They were able to become a citizen really quick. And once that happens, the CCP official will wire millions of dollars, sometimes billions of dollars, directly to these children, and they will invest it in taking over interest in Chinese companies, such as the way the Chinese government owns AMC theaters. That's a good one. Or the Waldorf Astoria. Did you guys know that the Chinese Communist Party owns the Waldorf Astoria? Or when you go to the theater, you're watching a movie at AMC theaters, did you know that that's the Chinese Communist Party running that? And there's a company out there, I can't remember which one it is, that makes movies. It's also owned by the Chinese Communist Party. But mostly, because everybody wants that money, and because everybody's afraid of what will happen if they say the wrong thing, they're living in fear, and the Chinese Communist Party can get away with almost anything, and obviously this helps to inflate the value of their products. But the thing is that one of the things that's really important to understand about how they work is they'll take an inch. They will never do something large that will cause a strategic reaction. For instance, you're not going to see them just instantly invade Taiwan, although they could. You're not going to see them do anything like that to any of these countries. What they're going to do is they're going to be like the neighbor that will go to the border of your property, and he will build a bush on your side of the property, and you'll think, hey, what's up with that? You'll think, well, whatever, I got a new bush. And next thing you know, there's a fence, and you'll say, what's up with this fence? And he'll say, well, there's a sewer line or there's a wire going through here, and I had to do this. And you'll go, well, okay, that sounds reasonable. And this will go on and on and on until you have no more backyard left. This is what Chinese do. This is their strategy, and they're doing it all over the world. And they use this debt trap strategy to do that. And once again, I call this soft power. That's what they call it, because they project soft power, because it's easier to win a war and take territory through the use of soft power. Also, when you use soft power and you attack slowly, you are able to not elicit a harsh response, and at the same time, you will be able to boost yourself, reinforce yourself, learn to new techniques and new technologies as you go. This is the Chinese technique. So let's talk about some of the places that's going on right now. I guess I'll start with Taiwan. Now, Taiwan isn't really so much of a soft power scenario, except that part of the constant reunification effort done in Taiwan basically means that Taiwan is able to invest in China. So, as part of the relaxation that was created by the Taiwanese government with working with China, they allowed Chinese or Taiwanese technology to go into China and set up shop, which of course is not good. Now, a surprising thing that I just learned, and it makes a lot of sense because this really hit me the other day, but I realized that precision optics, the sort of precision optics necessary to make the type of machinery necessary to make a semiconductor or to even make a machine capable of making a semiconductor, is probably something China is not able to do. And I found out that companies like Huawei, which is the questionable company that's doing the 5G technology that's so controversial right now, is dependent on foreign suppliers for every single chip that goes into their communications equipment. Now, bear in mind, this is a company that's doing everything it can to dominate the 5G technology in the Western world. And on top of that, it's an extremely big part of the so-called initiative that China refers to as it's the new Silk Road. They call it the One Belt. Yeah, of course I'm not getting this right, but it's the One Belt. It's the new Silk Road. And basically, we talked about this with the new highway system going into Gwadar, the train systems going into Russia, Europe, new shipping lines going to the rest of the world, and what have you. And certainly, the 5G installation in the rest of the world is a large part of this this new dominance that they're trying to engineer via this One Belt, I guess they call it the One Belt, One Road initiative. Well, the real thing about this One Belt, One Road initiative is basically they go to any country that they want to get to try to participate. It could be any small country, like the Maldives, for instance. And they will offer them a ridiculous loan to build some highway or some shipping port or something to connect to this system. And then something will happen, like COVID, that will cause this company to default on the loan, and China will step in and say, pay your loan off, or we're going to take that shipping port. We're going to take possession of this big asset in the middle of your country. Kind of like the way they tried to take over the port of Long Beach. Anyway, now India stepped in, of course, and saved the Maldives from this. They basically gave them the money to make the payment, from what I understood. I heard they only gave them $5 million. I would have hoped it would have been a little bit more than that because they needed to make a $10 million payment. But point is that this is a bullying tactic. Now, COVID, we'll go back to Wuhan. Yes, COVID was developed in this facility funded by Gates. Now, Gates, of course, is Chabad. He's part of this genocidal cult. So certainly these genocidal people are involved. Now, China and Chinese generals, there has been a high-ranking Chinese general, a very hawkish individual, who actually wrote a book that advocated for the use of a virus, just as COVID is doing right now, to destabilize the world in such a way that would allow China to essentially take over. Now, what we're seeing through the projection of soft power and the debt traps and the fact that so many of these countries that have gone into these debt traps are hard struck by the COVID pandemic This is something that China was expecting was going to be an opportunity for them to basically take over and institute this one road, one belt technology, whatever it was, this policy. Now, unfortunately for China or the Communist Party, this is not going to work. There is blood in the water right now. I'll tell you right now that the Chinese Party is going to die no matter what. And we'll look at the main reason it's going to die, even if there is no World War III, and then we'll talk about the World War III aspect. But China had 5 typhoons hit the continent. And there are 2 hitting landfall right now. The one hitting landfall right now is Hagaput. There's another one right behind it. I don't know what it is. And it's hitting in the area of Shanghai. Now, the Three Gorges Dam is somewhat west of Shanghai. But if the typhoon hits Shanghai, what it's going to do is it's going to inundate even further the areas below the Three Gorges Dam. Now, as I mentioned on Richard Carey's show, he'll probably want to join us last night, the Chinese obviously the Chinese depend on rice. And every year they need to harvest a certain amount of rice just to feed their people every year, just to fill their stores. We'll talk about the state of their stores and their reserves, but let's talk about the rice harvest that they have every year. It's divided into 3 sections. First, middle, center, whatever, center, late, whatever you want to call it. They're done at different times of the year. They're planted at different times of the year, and geographically they're planted in different areas. And all of these areas, almost all of them, are somewhere near the Yangtze River. Now, again, the first harvest is above on the higher sections of the Yangtze River. The second harvest is around the area of the Three Gorges Dam, and the third harvest is below the area of the Three Gorges Dam. Now, this is what happened. 5 typhoons hit the country, which means that everything above the Three Gorges Dam filled up the water. Now, the Three Gorges Dam, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about, is the largest dam in the world. It's a good 175 meters high. Okay, it's extremely large. There's more concrete in that thing than 4 Hoover dams, which is like ridiculously large. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of just how big this thing is. When the water filled up behind the Three Gorges Dam and the Yangtze all the way up to way up high up on China essentially became a lake. Incredible amounts of water were stored there. And on top of that, the water level rose so high that the mass of the Earth changed and the rotation of the Earth actually slowed down by 0.005 microseconds. This was reported by NASA, of course. This was the same thing as if you're a skater and you're doing a pirouette or you're spinning. You put your arms out, you go slower. When you cling your arms close to your body, you spin around faster. The Earth works the same way. By raising this huge body of water 175 feet up in the air, they changed the rotation of the Earth. Now, that's not really the issue here. The issue is that these 5 typhoons have basically flooded everything above the Three Gorges Dam. And the Three Gorges Dam was created to be flood control, transportation, in other words, letting the boats through it, which is a key issue, and also to act as a hydroelectric dam. And certainly this is also important is because the generator, as a hydroelectric dam, that alone makes the Three Gorges Dam the biggest dam in the world. It's got something like 38 turbines or something like this. It's ridiculously large. But the point is the electricity is so cheap in the vicinity of the Three Gorges Dam that this is where all the Bitcoin is mined. Okay? So if you're into Bitcoin, be advised that as the Three Gorges Dam goes, so does Bitcoin goes. In fact, because of the flooding and what's happening, a lot of the people that are mining the Bitcoin are not able to do that right now. So you're probably seeing some major fluctuations in all that cryptocurrency. But here's the thing about the dam. As I said, it's a transportation thing, which means it's got an elevator and it's got locks to let ships through. But because of that, they can't block the debris as it flows into this huge, huge, monstrous dam. The debris flowing up against the back of the dam is certainly a problem, and when you have massive flooding, obviously there's going to be a lot of debris. When you have a bunch of people who are going to throw their trash everywhere, certainly there's going to be a lot of debris. So this is a constant problem. Sediment is a constant problem. When you have dirty, dirty water like they do, the sediment is going to build up extremely high. It's going to change the dynamics of everything. When you have a flood situation like they have right now, they're having to open all of the spillways and basically release so much water out of the dam that the flood control aspect of this dam has now been completely lost. And they've done this because if they do not release this water, it's just going to go over the top of the dam anyway, and it's going to cause even more extensive flooding upstream. I should mention that I was talking about the food supply. Well, the first season of rice is completely gone. Okay, it was wiped out by typhoon. Okay, that's 30% of the Chinese rice supply. The next 30%, the one that's supposed to be getting harvested right now, that's underwater. Okay, it's not going to get harvested. The new season, the season that's coming, the last 30% of the entire year's rice production, it's downstream from the Yangtze. It's getting flooded right now. It's not going to recover. What does this mean? It means that at least 60% of all the Chinese yearly rice production has been wiped out right now, de facto. And the last 30% is probably going to be wiped out. So what is the media telling us? The media is telling us that food prices are going up. Better buy your rice because pretty soon rice is going to get expensive. Well, I live in California. We grow a lot of rice here, so, I'm not too worried about it. But you say, well, what about corn? Well, in China, the strategic reserves of corn, it's been determined that it's not full of corn like it's supposed to be. It's filled with dust and chaff, and the corn that is there is almost inedible. It's like ancient. And why could that be? How could that possibly happen? Well, because they've been lying all these years when they talk about how much corn people harvest, how much is turned in, how much is in the silos, what the condition of the corn in the silos. They don't dare say that it's all disgusting and rotten and they don't have any because of this or that, or this reason or that reason. So it's gotten so bad that the Chinese Communist Party has banned anybody from bringing a cell phone with them on their person when they go to pick up corn from the supply depot. They will not allow anybody to go in there and show the conditions of what's really going on. That's the Chinese propaganda. So the bottom line is the Chinese country is facing a famine. As of right now, the future of China is facing a famine. The people are facing a famine like we haven't seen in China since the days of Mao Zedong. This is coming. With all their money, they're going to have a huge famine. There's going to be huge amounts of starvation. Of course, the Chinese government will lie about this just like they lied about COVID. Now, gosh, it's so fun talking about this stuff because it gets so complex. But as I mentioned, the Chinese government never had a cohesive military structure. They never had a logistical thing where all the branches of the military would report together. They always had a system that worked on a hierarchy and that worked its way up to the top before they would send the decisions downstream. So obviously there was no cooperation between, say, the Navy and the Air Force. Everything had to go through the Chinese leadership. Well, in order to try to correct that issue, they've been creating these bases and what have you in Wuhan, and they've been putting all their eggs in one basket. Now, this is interesting because the forces that want to create this genocide and the forces that would like to defeat the Communist Party would like nothing better than to destroy Wuhan and basically take out all of these Chinese assets. Well, the dam might do that all by itself. We'll just talk about that real quick. I mean, let's just say this. If you haven't been paying attention, there have been ridiculous amounts of natural disasters hitting China, especially in the Wuhan area. There have been numerous lightning strikes, huge lightning strikes, one after the other. There have been earthquakes, one after the other. There have been typhoons, of course, one after the other. There's been all sorts of weird meteorological conditions. There was actually snowfall in Peking in the middle of the summer. Now, this, of course, is a bad omen. And this means that there's going to be a fall and a great retribution and a cleansing. So, of course, the Chinese Party and the people of China know this. Now, this, of course, could have been created by the United States government or whoever, but the bottom line is these things are actually happening. So, the Wuhan thing, if you look at the dam, as I said, there is a very strong possibility that the Three Gorges Dam is going to fail. And I would suggest that Chinese engineering and the quality of the materials they're using, given the corruption and the lying and the lack of transparency and the failure to follow standards, I think is going to come back and get them, because most Chinese construction, like most of these, like the building where the woman fell out of the 11th floor apartment, they're very shoddily constructed, and things that are meant to last 60 years are lucky if they last 20 or 30 years. So this is going to apply to everything, but I suspect that this dam could have a catastrophic failure. Now, if that happens, and right now, trust me, there's a lot of people in the world that are watching every day to see if this is going to happen and watching what's going to happen. But if it happens, there's going to be a 175-foot wall of water rushing at a very high speed down this valley. Now, the official Chinese media will tell you, and the Chinese lovers will tell you that China propaganda people will tell you that if that were to happen, that the water would dissipate into various valleys and what have you, and it would never really reach Wuhan because there's so many twists and curves in the river. Now, there's a computer graphic that was produced just recently, and of course it's banned on the Chinese internet, and of course they're very upset about this video, but it shows what will probably really happen. But at the very least, we all know there's at least 3 cities downstream from the Three Gorges Dam that will be destroyed. Eventually, in probably about 15 hours, the water will reach Wuhan. The thing about Wuhan, if you look at it via satellite map, you'll see that there are little lakes all over, scattered throughout the city and the general area, which means that the water level, obviously because the Yangtze River is running right through the middle of town, is very pervasive. In other words, we're talking about countries who have an area that has been having catastrophic flooding for millennia. Well, Wuhan will be underwater, possibly 75 feet of water, no matter what the Chinese government says. If that was to happen, there is no way on earth that the enemies of China will not take advantage of that. Because, as I've said, China's entire logistical structure is located there. Now, we talk about the Getty, and we talk about the sophistication of the continuity of government systems in the United States and the technology in the bunkers. China is certainly capable of building bunkers, but the bottom line is they're not capable of doing it, or they have not been doing it to the degree that the United States has been doing it. And for the most part, we're talking about a country that is dependent on catch-up and copying. So I suspect that the concept of going underground and locating their military authority in a bunker is something relatively new to these people, and I think that's going to catch them. So let's talk about all the various threats that China is facing right now. The ridiculous number of threats. Looks like we're already gone on almost an hour. I guess I'm going to have to take a break. All right, well, let me just go down a quick list of some of the threats that China is facing. Obviously, let's put it this way. Let me just cut to the chase. When it comes to a world war, the only countries that will basically be supporting China and on China's side, its axis, will be Iran, in Pakistan. So right away that should tell you something, and we'll talk about why that is the way it is. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a very short break first, okay? Very short break, maybe 5 minutes. All right, so stick around. All right, everybody, I'm back. What the heck? Why is my camera? That's weird. Okay, thank you for being with us here. I just want to shout out to everybody. There's a lot of people out there, interesting places. I've got Mexico, Australia, Romania, Italy, Canada, United States, of course. Hi, everybody. And, of course, I'm sure we have Oceanside out there somewhere. Laura, if you're out there, I need to talk to you, I think. All right, anyway. Okay, I want to talk about what's going on. I wanted to start with, there's so many things in China that are so bad that are coming. In other words, there's some evil stuff. The persecution, the atrocities that are going on in the country, none the least of which is, of course, the persecution of the Falun Gong, which is a harmless religious movement. They are basically persecuting, putting in concentration camps, and harvesting their organs. If you go buy a kidney or whatever organ in China right now, it's probably going to come from a person who's sitting there in a cell waiting for someone to come along and buy the organ that they're going to rip out of his body. It is that bad. It is illegal and evil as all hell. There's another part of India. Let's see, what is the name of the region? I always get this wrong. I'm sorry, did I say India? I meant to say China. It's the, where is it? Is it the Xinjiang. God, I get this wrong. Anyway, this is the part of the country that's essentially where the Uyghurs live, who are Muslim people. This is the sort of type of people that you might find in a country like Tajikistan or Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, this kind of area of the world, Kazakhstan. You know, these are countries that all are right there in that area. But basically what they did is Mao went in there and took over that area. This is a very important part of their border, their strategy for growth and everything else. But the bottom line is they've gone in there, they've taken the people who are primarily Muslim, and they've put them through extreme hardship. They've created massive concentration camps that they call re-education centers, that they've basically stuck all the men and women in of this religion, almost everybody in there. It's horrible. The social credit system and the security and the monitoring and all of this nonsense that's going on that's so pervasive right now, this particular area of the world is a test bed and where this is really working out. Now, Donald Trump has actually came out in support of the Chinese and their desire to persecute the Muslims in this part of the world. But it's gotten very, very bad. It's gotten so bad that they've actually will take these families, these Muslim families, they will throw the man, the husband, father in jail. They will take a person of Chinese descent, Han Chinese descent, a man, and put them in the household to replace the husband in that household. And they're trying to destroy the culture. The children go into what they call kindergartens. They're called kindergartens, but these are also actually concentration camps, re-education facilities that have barbed wire and everything else, where the children do not go home at night, and they are raised to be proper communist citizens that aren't following these superstitious beliefs. That's just one area where bad things are happening. Obviously, we know what they're doing in Tibet. We know what they did to the Dalai Lama. We don't have to talk about that. But these are all areas of the world that have been extremely troublesome and where the Chinese government, the communist government, has committed atrocities. Now, in Hong Kong, obviously Hong Kong was leased by the British and taken over through the Opium Wars. But the bottom line is that when the Chinese took over that country, they agreed to have certain rules. Basically, they called it one party, one country, two systems. So in other words, the people of Hong Kong had rights, human rights, civil rights, and were able to do things that people on the mainland were not able to do. Now, up until recently, that has completely gone away. The Chinese have instituted a new policy, which is basically what they call a security policy, new security policy, where they have raided the country with troops. You're obviously seeing lots of crackdown and lots of division going on with protests and what have you. it's become extremely bad, and there's cases of extreme amounts of civil rights being violated. And one of the things that's happening is that citizens of Hong Kong that hold a Hong Kong passport, are able to leave that country and go to the UK. And countries like Australia and the UK have offered them sanctuary. And China has just recently passed a law negating every single one of those passports, essentially trapping all those people in the country, just like the people on the mainland. So this, of course, is a very big problem. One of the other issues is that through Hong Kong, the Chinese government was able to get high technology from the rest of the world that it wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. So obviously, by changing the rules, it changes the desires for the rest of the world to cooperate by these terms. One of the things that Donald Trump did, of course, there's been American citizens. Well, let's just put it this way. There's, I can't really spend too much time on Hong Kong, but Taiwan was actually penetrated by spy rings, and the elections of the presidency, etc., are certainly compromised, and they're hoping that they will get a president or a candidate in there that will be sympathetic to China and will allow them to proceed with this reunification. Now, militarily speaking, certainly Taiwan is a military that is capable of inflicting some damage on China. China is certainly much larger with how large its military is and how many people and how many vehicles, etc. it has. But at the same time, Taiwan does receive American technology, and it certainly has a higher level of quality that the Chinese don't have. And at the same time, they're going to have a certain level of fighting capability that the average Chinese soldier is not going to have. One of the things that China likes to talk about is their ability to fight. They think but it's really a paper tiger. The thing is that the Chinese Communist Party has really had no major skirmishes except for, say, Tiananmen Square and these police actions. But the last major war that the Chinese had was in Vietnam, where they invaded Vietnam from 3 different locations. And they went pretty far, all the way down to Hanoi, very close to Hanoi. But the reason why they invaded Vietnam was because the Vietnamese army, after the war with the USA, went into Cambodia and destroyed the genocidal Khmer Rouge. Okay, now the Khmer Rouge, of course, was being supported by China. Now the Khmer Rouge were responsible for killing off 1/3 of their population. It was an incredibly evil, wicked, backwards, stupid regime, the sort of thing that the Chinese Communist Party loves, because technically they are an evil, stupid, backwards regime. Now, they were so pissed off at the Vietnamese that they invaded. Well, the Vietnamese had American weapons, so they had a little more better sophistication. Certainly, they had a little bit of battle experience from having been in a war with the United States. So basically, there was something like 23,000 Chinese deaths and 10,000 Vietnamese deaths by the time it was over. So basically, the big country's ass got kicked by the little country. Of course, the Chinese will tell you that they won, and they'll tell you that it was a police action. I actually had a sit-down dinner with some Norinco spies back during the Clinton regime, and they basically said that they likened their attack on Hanoi as being the same thing as when the United States went into Grenada. However, the fact that they were doing so because of the fall of the Khmer Rouge, if anything, the Vietnamese should have been congratulated for taking upon themselves to rid the world of the Khmer Rouge scum. So the very fact that the Chinese were contributing to that regime, I would say they've got some explaining to do, and they should be forever tainted by that. But the point is that they don't have any military experience, and they lie about everything. Japan, of course. Let's go down the list of enemies of China right now. China, of course, is after territory, and they're taking it everywhere they can get. Certainly when Kim Il-jong is dead, they intend to take over North Korea, and certainly they would like to have South Korea. But they have actually laid claim to the Russian territory of Vladivostok, which is very, very close to the Chinese northern territories. But that's crazy. They've laid claim to that. They've also laid claim to Japanese territory. They laid claim to Vietnamese territory. They've laid claim to Myanmar or Burmese territory. They've laid claim to some territory in Bhutan, Nepal, India. Then there's Kyrgyzstan. They've laid claim to territory over there. Let's see, what else? Obviously, in the South China Sea, they're actively being aggressive with the Philippines. They're being aggressive with Vietnam. They're being aggressive with Brunei. They're being aggressive with Malaysia, and they're being aggressive with Indonesia. Now, bear in mind, Indonesia has 250 million people. Okay, they're no slouches. The Philippines, they're not all that big. But here's the thing. They're surrounded by enemies. Each one of these countries in itself right now is on a war footing with China. India had a skirmish just recently in the Himalayas in an area called the Galwan River Valley. Now, there is a zone up there. On one side of the zone, it's occupied by the Indian troops. The other side is occupied by the Chinese troops. And there's a small area. There is no border, but they do have an area they call the zone of actual control. Now, the zone of actual control is a line that goes back and forth depending on who moves their forces backwards in this way and that way. Well, just recently, the Chinese moved into an area they weren't supposed to be. The Indians went and confronted them. There was a big brouhaha, and the Chinese withdrew, and they went back to where they're supposed to be. Well, that didn't last very long. They went back and they set up a new outpost in this area where they had been asked to clear out. The Indians went back to investigate and asked them why they had set up a new outpost, and what they found was fresh faces, new troops they had not been familiar with, were very aggressive. Why were those new troops there? Because the Chinese Communist Party needed to stir up trouble because they need to save face. Face is incredibly important in China, and of course this was an art of war tactic where they would create trouble to make an enemy do something so that the population would be distracted by their own inefficiency, like the floods and the COVID and the starvation that's coming, and have them focus on another enemy like India. So they set up this clash. So what happened was when these guys went up to investigate, there were people up there in an outpost. Now, bear in mind, this was an outpost that was not supposed to be armed. Well, anyway, they went up there with somebody, and they actually asked them what was going on, and they were attacked with rocks. Basically, the Chinese threw rocks at the Indian troops. Well, what happened was one of the leaders, the leader of the Indian troops, was hit in the head, fell off a cliff into the Galwan River, and drowned. Now, the Indians were extremely pissed off because they loved their commander, and this happened. So they attacked, and Chinese were killed. They killed like 20 Chinese. They went berserk, and they killed like 20 Chinese. Anyway, the situation cooled off, but instead of cooling off, they went back and reoccupied the same area, only this time there was like 100 Indians and 250 Chinese, and they did it again. Only this time, the Chinese attacked the Indians, and this time the Chinese had actually made clubs or metal pipes with spikes welded to the ends of these clubs, and they had attacked the Indians with this. This was actually described in the news media by military analysts as medieval-style combat. So the Chinese attacked the unarmed Indian troops with these clubs. Now, bear in mind, the last time they had engaged, it was fist fights. After they killed the commanding officer, they got into fist fights, and that's what happened. But this time, the Chinese troops came back with these clubs. Needless to say, the outnumbered Indian troops actually killed the guys with the clubs, took their clubs and used it against the Chinese, and there were a significant number of dead Chinese. We know that there were at least 20 dead Indians because India reports at least 20 dead soldiers from this incident, the Galwan incident, but we suspect that the Indians inflicted much heavier casualties on the Chinese. So this blew up in the face of the Chinese, and of course they are covering up what really happened. But the point is because this happened, India has basically said, screw you to China. They've already had bad relationships, but now it's over. They're on a full war footing. Now, a lot of people say that China has a relationship with Russia, and it's going to be Russia and China against the United States. This is a wet dream by the people in Pakistan and in Iran. It's not happening. The reality is that the Russians have the S-400 anti-aircraft system, which of course is the best one in the world, and of course China and India both want to buy this. Only thing is that because of what happened, Russia is no longer going to sell this system to China, and they have given India most favored status to get the first ones available. So this is not a good thing. This is not a good thing for them. Another thing is Japan. They've been screwing with Japan for a long time. Japan certainly has now changed its constitution to allow them to do things they haven't been able to do. Japan just took delivery of a significant number of advanced American fighter jets, the stealth fighter, F-35 or whatever it is. And of course, China is extremely unhappy about this. But not only is that going on, but Japan is also developing their own version of the stealth fighter. Now we're talking about a fifth-generation fighter, a true fifth-generation fighter. Here's the thing. The Chinese, they lie. They lie about everything, including their military. They have a jet called the M20 or something of this nature, and it's essentially their state-of-the-art so-called fifth-generation jet, and they claim that this is equivalent to the American F-35. The reality is that this thing doesn't come anywhere close to the capability of the F-35, and it's actually a fourth-generation jet. So technically, the Russians and the Americans both have jets that will defeat large numbers of Chinese jets. So in other words, the Chinese Air Force, even though it has considerable numbers, could probably be really screwed up by a relatively small Air Force, such as it might encounter with a country like Taiwan, or maybe China, or maybe India, or maybe who knows who. But here's the thing. China, because it's been bullying everybody, and because it's physically on the ropes because of the famine and because of the flooding and because of the fact that there's going to be a revolution anyway because the people are over the Chinese communist shit and the corruption, the rest of the world has been bullied and extorted and pushed around and put into debt traps, are going to strike back. But they're not going to strike back by themselves. They're all going to do it at once. A perfect example of this is a new agreement that's called the Quad Agreement that basically involves the United States, Japan, Australia, and I believe the Philippines. But basically, this is an organization that was put together to counter China in the South China Sea. But we're talking about a group that together could defeat China. Australia is extremely pissed off at China right now. And of course, China has been trying to buy up most of Australia and owns almost half of Australia. And not only that, they've penetrated their government, and they've possibly have at least 2 MPs at least that were penetrated and owned by the Chinese military. And one of them was just removed here recently, a guy named Shaukat Moslemain. And this guy's a Lebanese Muslim. Oh, by the way, just real quick, the explosion in Beirut was done by Israel. I called it. There is thermal imaging of a missile coming in. There was a fire started in a factory, and of course this factory did probably house weapons, but obviously there's no reason why Beirut shouldn't have weapons to defend itself with, but it was destroyed by a device, and this device, I suspect, was an actual low-yield nuclear device, and that's why it produced that mushroom cloud over the city. But it was a low-yield device designed to produce a minimal amount of any residual radiation, such as what they did at the Twin Towers. Okay? So yes, Israel took advantage of the situation to attack and destroy Beirut. Extremely heinous. There's the enemy right there. But anyway, Moslemain hated Israel, of course, and that made him very famous in the Australian thing. And he also suggested that Australia was full of, there was the obsolete, he made reference to the obsolete scum of white Australia, so he's very prejudicial. But anyway, this is why I advise people to avoid the polarization thing. But the point is that China never thought Australia would strike back, and obviously Australia certainly does not have the power to take on China by itself. However, this is what's happening. everybody's gotten together and said, we're going to defend Taiwan. The United States, Japan, India, Australia, and even the European Union is getting in on the act. Now, I don't really want to spend too much time going over all the various different sanctions, what have you, but basically there's so many of them. Donald Trump, basically, one of the things he did was he passed a law just recently decertifying China's ability to audit their financial systems. In other words, the Chinese stock exchange, the Shanghai, whatever it is basically being declared as illegitimate. In other words, if you invest your money in a Chinese stock, you're doing so at your own risk because it's basically understood that whatever they say the value of that stock is will be fraudulent. That's what's meant by the audit. It's like Standard & Poor's, whatever. If you put up a prospectus, you better have accurate numbers for your assets and your liabilities, et cetera, et cetera. China doesn't do that. So the whole world is calling the Communist Party out. I should mention that there are factions within the Chinese Communist Party. One of the factions, of course, is being led by Xi Jinping, and the other faction is led by Jiang Zemin, who was a leader of the country 2 or 3 leaders back. He was also, you'll remember him, he's the kind of froggy-looking guy with the big square glasses. But him and another dude are basically the architects of the entire persecution of the Falun Gong movement. So, and that's, in other words, even though he's on the outs with this Xi Jinping, at the same time, they're following his policies to the core. Now, I should mention something about Xi Jinping. His policies have certainly brought, huge amount of wealth to China and elevated the living standard of many, many people over the last 30 years. But we're talking about a man who was born in a cave. He's as peasants go, I suppose being born in a cave is probably below being born in a mud hut or a shack or something of this nature. So this is somebody who certainly, like so many of these despots, has a ego and issues with society and their personal feeling of worth. Now, if you look at the Communist Party leadership, the top 7 people, these people are really uneducated. Xi Jinping, the number 1 leader guy, he does have a PhD, but it's in Marxism. It's worthless. The next most educated man in the Chinese party is the number 2 man you'll see standing next to him with the glasses, and he has a degree in economics. But the rest of these guys, 3 of them, I think, went to some sort of Marxist communist university where basically they didn't care who you were. You could be a peasant farmer and they'd stick you in this university and teach you communist doctrine and call it a degree. 3 of them have that. The other 3 have nothing. So basically you're talking about one of the most populous countries in the world, or the most powerful, wealthy countries in the world, and it's being led by a cadre of idiots. Now, certainly Donald Trump is no genius in spite of his claims, but at the same time, he didn't spend his school years listening to Marxist bullshit. And you'll have to understand is that most of these people have. So you're going to have a large portion of people who are really focused on this Marxist bullshit. But at the same time, they're extremely selfish people, self-centered. You're talking about a country where if a baby wanders into the street, someone runs over it, they're going to back up a couple times and make sure it's dead. You're talking about a country where you don't dare help an old woman that looks like she's fallen over and needs assistance because she's faking you out. She's going to sue you and say that you pushed her down. I mean, these are some of the evil things it is. And unfortunately, there are whole generations of people like that because they've been ruined by having their religion destroyed, starvation, and being told to focus on on these ridiculously evil Marxist doctrines. And before I go too far, just to remind you guys of who's responsible for all this, don't forget, Zionism and Bolshevism were essentially created in two coffee houses located in Lithuania by a couple little Jewish clubs. And Bolshevism went on to kill hundreds of millions of people. And certainly Karl Marx and Lenin and these characters, the ones that inspired the Chinese leadership like Mao, were of this theology, this philosophy. So it is what it is. And I don't need to go into what the nature of this particular enemy is, but this is what created these people. Now, if you look at what happened in the Soviet Union, we know that the Soviet Union was the same thing. It was basically something that was created by these Marxists, these Bolshevists. And when we look at the fall of the Iron Curtain, we think that this is a good thing and that they've conquered communism, when the reality was that the entire thing was a big pump and dump, and the plan was to nationalize all of the assets, put all of the assets into fixed assets, and then crash the country and take over those assets pennies on the dollar. Kind of like what happened in the USSR when all of those oligarchs became billionaires by taking over all of those public projects when the USSR crashed. Well, the same thing will happen in China. I can guarantee that. But here's the other thing. As I said, most of the money stolen from by the Chinese government, and when I stolen, I mean this was siphoned off the top of all business being conducted by anybody doing business in China, has been sent to the United States, almost $1 trillion or more, probably, as well as other areas. When the time comes, and I'm pretty sure this is going to come pretty soon, the perfect storm is here. And if you ask me, they're waiting for the Three Gorges Dam to collapse, because if it collapses and takes out the Chinese military and essentially spells out starvation for sure for the country of China, the bully's going to get beat up. And everybody in the schoolyard, everybody surrounding China has been getting bullied by China, and they're going to beat it up, and they're going to take all that money back. And don't tell me that the Chinese military is going to do this or that, because remember, we're talking about some very selfish people who will only think about themselves. They have zero war experience. Zero war experience. So it doesn't matter how many videos you see of Chinese troops marching with matching uniforms. Marching is not fighting. Here in America, we've had soldiers from families. We've had 3 generations of soldiers fighting in battle constantly here in this country. They haven't had one. So their troops are untested and their weapons are untested. We already know they lie about everything. We don't know if their hypersonic missiles even exist. We don't know if their nuclear program exists. It could all be crap. And if we know anything about how they build things, more than likely, if they launch a missile at us, it's going to crash in the town next door. This is a very common thing for these people. I really don't want to go too far because we're probably getting late. We're going to go somewhere here pretty quick. Yeah, no. But, oh, that's right. I did want to bring in Richard here. He wanted to come in really quick. Richard, you can help me out. Where are you, Richard? Oh, gosh. Let's see. Oh, there he is. Is he green? Yeah, he's green. Whoops. I'm doing it wrong. Sorry, guys. This is the worst part of the show. Anyway, the Pakistan thing, you wonder why Pakistan is connected. They are one of the countries, of course, that was most closely connected to the Silk Road Initiative with the port of Gwadar. Gosh, I lost my thing here. Damn it. How'd that happen? That's crazy. Oh, people. Yeah, bear with me a second. I completely lost my my page. That's just terrible. Because I was trying to hook up this guy incorrectly. Darn it. Oh, here we go. Is that me? Nope, that's not me. Shoot. All right, I'm not going to worry about it. I won't be able to hook anybody up. That's the problem, because I can't get back to my page. I lost it. But I'm going to probably end the show here because I'm running out of steam. But as far as the COVID thing is concerned, when you remember that the genocide and killing massive amounts of people is the ultimate goal here, you got to realize is that you can't blame the Chinese, you can't blame Bill Gates, you can't blame Donald Trump, you can't blame. They're all responsible, and even though they may be fighting each other, they're still playing their part in making sure that everybody gets infected or everybody has to take this this shot. Seriously, can't believe I lost this thing here. Huh. So don't hate the Chinese, although there's going to be some devastation. Certainly there's going to be some extremely strong war rhetoric. And I don't know whether or not this thing is going to save Donald Trump's presidency or whether or not it's enough to get him reelected. I think that the blaming China for this COVID thing, whether that's accurate or not, it's not really fair to say, because ultimately China is going to be a victim just like everybody else. In fact, I think China, of course, has had more death than anybody. It's so bad. In one area, I know that if someone in an apartment building tests positive, they will actually weld the doors shut to the apartment building, and everyone is just stuck inside there. They have to have food passed up to them through a window. It's that bad. All right, I'm going to get out of here. We're just going a little bit, 30 minutes over the hour, and if you'd like, I will pick up on this next week, because I got to tell you, obviously, this is something that's really developing. It's obviously very much in flux. This next week is going to say a lot because, like I said, there are 2 typhoons hitting Shanghai right now that will cause massive amounts of damage, but ultimately, if they actually cause a failure of the dam, Three Gorges Dam, we're going to see a catastrophe of an unimaginable scale. And obviously we're talking about the death of millions and millions of people that live in the cities downstream, because this water is going to come through there so fast. It's going to be devastating. Anyway, like I said, there will be starvation because the world will not be able to feed 1.5 billion people when they don't have any rice next year. That's just the way it is. So more than likely, they're going to have to do something. There's a reason why China wants to take over Australia. They want to grow food. They need territory. All right. I'm going to remind everybody that, once again, I want to thank you for being here. All you guys are listening right now, and I'm just going to say, hi, Dan. Hey, RD. Hi, everybody. But Romania, whoever that is in Romania, how you doing? Help me out. Continue to help me out. You're a tiny little group, you people that listen here. But it's up to you to really cause that big infection. Get out there with that Occupy the Getty. The Getty is the plan to save the world. Post that everywhere, okay? If you see Trump speaking, post it. Make that comment. Get it out there. Throw stuff into the fire. And like Bob, you're talking about going to see that web guy. Well, he's probably going to be talking in some little group. Well, I need you guys to find those little chat groups that are out there, the meetup groups, whatever, that anywhere where people gather and have a speaker. I need you to get me in there, okay? Tell them to have me in their group, okay? And seriously, people, you got to become stronger proponents of the message. You've got to become more expert at what we're saying, and you can't be bullied by people that give you crap, because here's the thing, you got to remember. Oh, look at someone's trying to join the call. I wonder who that is. Well, they missed the call. They don't get to. Are you here? Message. You've got to become more. Diana.
Hello?
Diana.
Hello?
Oh, did you want to say something, Diane?
Yeah, my cousin Dennis J. Blasco was in China for 23 years as the Chinese army, whatever. But he's the author of the book, The Chinese Army Today. He was an ambassador for the U.S. with the Chinese Army for 20 years in China.
Okay, and what would you like to share?
The book is The Chinese Army Today.
He wrote a book.
And he's an American he went to the Naval Academy in Annapolis.
Okay. Well, I don't have time to push the book right now, I'm afraid.
Well,
Okay.
no, I just wanted to let you know.
Well,
because
you can put that in the comment section on the video, okay, if you want. How's that sound? You can leave
Sure.
it there. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, listen, I'm going to get out of here, but
hey, good show. Good show.
I can't even find a button for everything here, so I can't even add any callers because I lost the damn button because I screwed up trying to add
thanks
somebody.
for the info. Beautiful.
All right. Okay. All right, Diane, get out of here. I'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
See you next time. All right. Once again, people, I'll continue and do this as you like. If you listen to the entire video or whatever, I thank you for that, and please leave a comment. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber on the YouTube. Hit the like button, all that good stuff. If you want to help me out, obviously we need it because, the stuff comes in spurts. Usually it seems like when I do some healing or something, somebody sends me some money, but I do healing every Saturday. I try to. I'm in Facebook jail right now. Even my alt is in Facebook jail, of course. It's so bad. But all you got to do is send me an email to law17gun, LAW17GUN at AOL.com, and I will either send you a copy of my book or offer you some healing or recruit you for Jedi work, whatever you want to do, okay? Or if you have questions, or if you want to have me do an interview or something like that, just send me an email, okay? And obviously, again, PayPal, if you do the PayPal, it's StephenKelley714@gmail.com, and it helps if you say it's for a friend or family when they ask you that question. You don't put that in comments, but it's fun when I see people put that in comments, but that's not what it's for. All right, again, thank you so much. And remember, occupy the Getty. That's the only thing we care about. All right? Push that message. I'll talk to y'all next week, and we'll... I have my music set up. But I'll talk to y'all next week, and we'll continue on this subject matter if you want. Okay? You let me know in the comment section what I skipped or if we need to do that, and we will. Fair enough? All right. With that, I'm going to do my best to get out of here, okay? So, I'll see you next week. And again, like I said, I'm in Facebook jail. I don't have any ability to talk to anybody, so if you need me, send me an email, and please use those mediums for me because I can't, all right? I need you to do it for me. So, talk to you soon. Love you all. Good night. God bless. Adios. And goodbye.